And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is Brewing with Underwhelming Commanders, episode 34. And we got an interesting one here. I got a lot of interesting submissions for the poll this time. Of course, the poll is in the description below if you want to go vote on the next video. And I definitely got some really challenging ones this time. So starting out at number 3 with Bartel, Runeaxe. And this is one that some guy suggested he wanted to see it in the poll. So I was like, sure, I'll throw it in there. Didn't give it a hard look. It ended up coming in number 3, and it's really tough to build around. Needless to say, it's one of those really bad legends from the original Legends set. So 3 black, red, and a green giant warrior 6/5 has vigilance. Okay, that's something you could build around, and can't be the target of aura spells. That is it. That's all you got to work with. Not a whole lot. So I will throw out some ideas here. First of all, if your commander has vigilance, you can do the untapping thing, right? I've done this with a Palladium Moors deck before, which is another commander that's tough to build around. If your commander has vigilance, obviously that means it doesn't have to tap to attack, so you can do Staxy type of untap effects. So like a Meekstone, for example, right? You could throw a Meekstone in this deck. Say you could do maybe a Voltron strategy if you're interested in that. Not a great Voltron commander, but you don't have to worry about the Meekstone affecting your commander because your commander is not tapping, right? Mudslide's another one that would fit there in these colors. Again, not a lot of those kind of effects in Jund colors though. And also the problem with a Voltron strategy, if you want to go after that, is your commander can't be the target of auras, which are often used in those kinds of strategies, right? So it doesn't work great there either. There is an upside, obviously, in that your commander can't be the target of aura spells, can't use that Song of the Dryads on your commander, which is a popular card in the format, can't use that Imprisoned in the Moon, Lignify. There are lots of those auras that will shut down your commander. Don't have to worry about those, so that is a bit of an upside. Definitely not going to be building around that ability though, right? Having your commander not be targeted by aura spells is essentially like it having sort of bad hexproof or ward 1 or something, right? You're not going to build around that. It's just a nice little bonus. And again, the vigilance, not really great for building around either. You could do it a little bit. So as I say all the time, if you have a super underwhelming commander like this, gotta look at those creature types, and giant and warrior are both really popular creature types in the format. So if I'm building this deck, what I'm going to do is giant and warrior tribal. That's right, I'm going to do both. If you want a more interesting way to build this deck, I mean, you could just do a giant tribal deck in Jund, I guess. You could do a warrior tribal deck in Jund. I want to do both. An interesting way to go with this deck, I think, is to both do giant and warrior tribal. We're going to combine the two, right? There are 33 giant warriors in the format. That's a lot. That is more than enough to make a both giant warrior tribal. So all the creatures in your deck, or the majority of the creatures in your deck, the ones that fit anyway, are going to be both giants and warriors. So that way we can do a lot of the giant tribal stuff and the warrior tribal stuff, and it will fit with our commander, obviously, because our commander's a giant and a warrior, and it will fit with a bunch of our other creatures as well. So you could throw cards in there like Mindblade Render and Raider's Spoils, which are going to benefit our warriors, right? Whenever our warriors connect, we're going to be able to draw a card and lose a life. So that's going to be great there with any of our creatures. Bloodshin Fanatic is a great one. 1 black, Orc Warrior 3/3, pay 1 and a black, sacrifice another warrior. Target player loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the sacrifice creature's power. So this is a great way to help close out the game. After you've gotten your opponents low on life, you can now sacrifice your commander or any of your other creatures to drain them for even more. Bramblewood's Paragon is a good one. Not a giant, but it is an elf warrior. 1 and a green, 2/2. Each other warrior you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. So that's giving a nice buff to our warriors. And then also our creatures with +1/+1 counters on them will have trample as well. So that might be a good fit there. And of course, we got a lot of giant tribal stuff as well, like Thundercloud Shaman's a fantastic one. 3 red, giant shaman, 4/4. When Thundercloud Shaman enters the battlefield, it deals damage equal to the number of giants you control to each non-giant creature. So sort of a nice, almost one-sided board wipe there. Calamity Bear is a great one. If a giant source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage to the permanent or player instead. So obviously that's going to go in the deck. We got Sunrise Sovereign, which is a Anthem effect, +2/+2, and trample to all of our giants, and is also a giant warrior, so you're getting both of those creature types there as well. And the one creature I would put in the deck that is neither a giant or a warrior is Stink Drinker Daredevil, 2 and a red goblin rogue, 1/3, but giant spells you cast cost 2 less to cast, so I think it's worth finding a place in the deck for that guy. And that's about all I got. I mean, really, there isn't anything else. You can play on the vigilance a little bit, but mostly your commander's a giant and a warrior. I think it would be really interesting to make a both giant warrior tribal deck. And, you know, you can get a lot of advantages there. There is a fair amount of stuff benefiting the warriors, and there is a fair amount of stuff benefiting the giants. So you just think about your commander alone. A lot of those effects are going to benefit just your commander because it is both a giant and a warrior. I think that's the best way to go with this guy, and probably the only way. Moving on to our number 2 commander this week, and it's Dralnu, Lich Lord. 3, a blue and a black zombie wizard, 3/3. If damage would be dealt to Dralnu, Lich Lord, sacrifice that many permanents instead. Ouch. Tap, target instant or sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. The flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. So we have a incredibly bad downside for our commander, and then we have a really awesome, powerful ability. I mean, just being able to tap and give your stuff flashback in your graveyard is great. Now, the first ability, you could actually build around that. If you wanted to be really wild and crazy, you could do a deck where maybe you want to sacrifice permanents. I mean, this is in a way kind of an upside. Your commander actually doesn't take damage, right? This is a replacement effect, and I'm going to talk about this in one of my rules videos coming up. Your commander will not take damage. You can block with this guy all day long, and he's never going to take combat damage because he does not take damage. Instead, you're going to sacrifice that many permanents, but of course, that's really, really bad, right? If there's for some reason you want to sacrifice permanents, though, this could be a good thing, right? You chump with your commander, then you can sacrifice some stuff. I think there's probably better ways to sacrifice permanents. I don't think you want to go down that route. Mostly this is going to be a downside, and it's not that horrible. I know it sounds really, really bad, but obviously we're not going to be attacking or blocking with our commander. So that part you don't have to worry about. You don't have to worry about the combat damage. All you have to worry about is the direct damage. And of course, one of the most popular cards in the format, Blasphemous Act, is going to be the bane of your existence. 13 damage to your commander. It's all going to be prevented, but you're going to have to sacrifice 13 permanents, which probably means you're going to have to sacrifice everything, including your commander. By the way, his ability doesn't save him from himself. You will have to sacrifice your commander as well. So it's pretty much game over for you if someone casts a Blasphemous Act. So if we're building a Dralnu Lich Lord, before I even get to that second ability, I want to prevent myself from essentially losing the game just by someone casting a Blasphemous Act. So phasing is probably the best way to do this. Now, I will just point out, black does have a lot of the give this creature indestructible until end of turn, and this is another thing that I'm going to cover in one of my rules videos. That won't work here, okay? An indestructible creature still takes damage. They just don't die from taking lethal damage, all right? So if I give my Dralnu indestructible, I'm still going to have to sacrifice those permanents because my commander is still technically taking damage, right? All that damage is just removed on the cleanup step. Again, I'll get more into that in a rules video. So those effects won't work here. However, what we do have is phasing, which absolutely does work. Phasing is the best way to protect your stuff without a doubt. And blue has a lot of that, right? There's a lot of great ones. Verdolian Illusionist is one that I would absolutely put in this deck for sure. And as I will get to, it also has a tap ability, which is going to fit with this theme because our commander also has a tap ability, right? So Verdolian Illusionist, one of my personal favorites, is going to be one of the first cards I put in this deck. There's a lot of other great phasing cards right now in blue. They've been doing this a little bit more in blue. They were doing it in white for a while, and now they're switching back to blue. So I guess blue and white are sort of the phasing colors, but that's what you want for protecting your commander. You're going to want to make sure you have a few in your deck. It's good for just someone's trying to path my commander and I can phase it out. But more importantly, you want to save one into your hand just in case someone has that Blasphemous Act, right? I mean, you're going to know if anyone's playing red. If you sit down at a table with your Dralnu deck and someone's playing red, it's almost a guarantee that they have a Blasphemous Act in their deck. So you're going to want to save that protection spell, that phasing spell for that moment. I would have one in my hand ready to go just in case with the mana untapped. If no one's playing red, then you're probably going to be okay, right? You're probably not going to have any damage-based effects coming at your commander, so you're not going to have to worry about it much. So it is going to play into it a lot with this deck, what colors you are playing against. So let's get to the second ability, and obviously the one that you're going to build around, and really you don't have to do much here, right? Again, there's not a whole lot to talk about here. You're giving stuff in your graveyard flashback, and as I already alluded to in a video I just did about 5 cards that should see way more play, I talked about Auric Loremage, and I've talked about this card so much on this channel because I love it, and it seems like nobody else seems to. It's in less than 10,000 decks on EDH Rec, and I think it can go in any graveyard deck in black, for which of course there are a ton. And Dralnu is the perfect deck. Like, this is the deck where Auric Loremage is such a phenomenal fit. This is a match made in heaven. First of all, obviously Auric Loremage is putting stuff into your graveyard, right? Tap, search your library for a card, put it into your graveyard, then shuffle, which is exactly what you want, right? This just becomes a tutor for your commander. I need a removal spell, I tap my Auric Loremage, I go get a rapid hybridization, put it in my graveyard, then I tap my commander, and I can cast it from my graveyard for 1 mana. Any problem you have, right? My opponent's about to cast that Blasphemous Act, I tap my Auric Loremage, go get a counter spell out of my library, throw it in my graveyard, and then my commander can now cast it from my graveyard. Match made in heaven. Now, what makes this even better is that the part of Auric Loremage that really doesn't concern me typically works fantastically here, which is if an instant or sorcery card is put into the graveyard this way, you put a counter on your Auric Loremage, so that's going to be playing into it as well. Your Auric Loremage is going to be sitting there getting bigger and bigger and bigger to the point where you might actually even want to attack with it. And then to take this into the stratosphere, you have 2 cards here that have tap abilities, right? Like I've already talked about, you're going to have a lot of untappers in this deck, right? You're going to have 1,000-Year Elixir for sure, maybe Fate Stitcher. You're going to put a whole bunch of untappers in this deck to help untap your commander, and those work with the Auric Loremage as well. So now I can untap my commander to use its ability again, or if I really want to use my Auric Loremage again, I can use that instead. Perfect card in this deck, has to go in this deck for sure. Other things you want to be doing in this deck, you're going to be casting stuff from your graveyard a lot, so you want Secrets of the Dead, you want River Kelpie, right? Because whenever you cast a spell from your graveyard, you're going to be drawing a card. Fantastic value there. Those will have to go in there for sure. Tormod the Desecrator, you might also want to be doing, because that's going to be a card leaving your graveyard, right? Any of those instants and sorceries, when you cast them for your flashback, of course, they're going to go to the stack, so they're going to leave your graveyard. You're going to get a 2/2 zombie, so that might be some good value you can get there. I think Havengul Lich is a good fit here. It's on theme, right? It's on brand, because it is a Lich. Both of these guys are zombie wizards, and you can pay 1 and cast target creature card in a graveyard this turn. When you cast that card this turn, Havengul Lich gains all activated abilities of that card until end of turn. This used to be an absolute commander staple. You just threw it in your Dimir decks no matter what, because it is such a fantastic card. You can cast it from your opponent's graveyard as well, right? You could steal your opponent's creatures. This used to be a card I'd see all the time in Commander. I don't see it much anymore, but it's just a really nice fit here, because now you can cast creature cards from graveyards as well, right? You can already cover the instants and sorceries with your commander. Havengul Lich will allow you to get the creatures out of your graveyard as well, your commander included, right? So I think that's a great fit as well. And other than that, I mean, you're doing an instant and sorcery theme. You don't really have to build around it. And like I talked about in that video, my patron did a self-mill strategy a little bit, and, you know, wheeling, windfalling, stuff like that. I don't think you need to do that at all. If you just have lots of instants and sorceries in your deck, you're going to be casting them all the time, and they're going to end up in your graveyard, and then you can flash them back like just normally, like you would with flashback, right? You would normally cast a flashback spell, it would go to your graveyard, and then at a later time, you would use it for its flashback cost to get more value out of it. That's how I would build this deck. I wouldn't concentrate and fill your deck too much up with self-mill, discard, that kind of things, because I don't think you really need it. You are in an instant and sorcery theme, so obviously the usual suspects there, like Archmage Emeritus or something, you're going to want, because you're going to be doing that a lot. Octavia, also a fantastic fit here, has that Magecraft ability which fits, but also has the, you want lots of instant sorcery in your graveyard so you can cast it for a lot cheaper. Also a fantastic fit here. So all those usual suspects will fit here, but at the end of the day, you're just building mostly a typical instant and sorcery theme. You're just going to want to add the graveyard aspect as well. Like I said, where you have to begin with this commander is, I need to be able to protect it from that first ability, because it's just going to be game over for me if someone casts a specific spell that will do a lot of damage to my commander. So you got to make sure you start there and then build up from there. And after that, it's just mostly good stuff, instant and sorcery, right? You just put all your favorites in there. there. All those cards from my 10 cards videos, right? The black and blue instants and sorceries from those videos that you've wanted to be trying out in a deck. This is a great deck to try them out in. All right, but moving on to our number one commander this time, and it is Iname Death Aspect. 4 black, spirit 4/4. When Iname Death Aspect enters the battlefield, you may search your library for any number of spirit cards and put them into your graveyard, then shuffle. And like I say all the time, whenever a card says any number on it, that means you can be doing some really powerful broken stuff with it, right? Any number is a lot. You got 99 cards in your deck, right? And it's interesting, I had this as a suggestion in the poll, and I'm like, okay, I'll throw it on there. And when it won, the first thing I thought of was my very first 10 deck ideas video, where I talked about an Iname Death Aspect deck, and I decided, well, this is as good of an opportunity as any to revisit that idea. And so that's what I went with here. I went with a combination of a couple of my ideas. This is the kind of commander that I'm going to probably want to do a little bit of setup for. Then I cast my commander, fill my graveyard with a bunch of cards, and then now I can start going to town, right? It's unlikely that you're going to cast your commander more than once. He's an enabler, right? This commander is an enabler to what else you will be doing in the deck. It's likely that you will play a game with this deck and only cast your commander once, and that's it. You might not ever need to do it again, right? Because you've already gotten all the spirits out of your deck. However, there is some situations where you're going to want to cast it again, which I will get to, and this deck is doing a lot. There's a lot to talk about here. It's a really interesting deck. So first things first, we're going to be filling our graveyard with creatures, so we're going to want those mass recursion effects like Living Death and Twilight's Call. Obviously, we want that because now we can get all those creatures out of our graveyard, put them directly into play, and of course, these are symmetrical. Your opponent gets it as well, but obviously, we're going to be taking way more advantage of it than our opponents are. Haunting Voyage and Patriarch's Bidding also work great this way. This is going to choose creature types, which we're fine with that because obviously all of our creatures are going to be the same creature type. So this is going to be even more one-sided just for us, right? They're going to work great. And a card that you absolutely have to have in this deck is Song of the Damned, because you're going to pay 1 black mana for this at instant speed, and it's going to add a black for each creature card in your graveyard. Now, I do have only 20 spirits in this deck, right? So if we got nothing else going on, I'm going to cast my commander, go get those 20 spirits out of my deck. I see no reason not to get all of them. Throw them into your graveyard, and then I will get 20 mana off my Songs of the Damned, which is obviously fantastic. So there's 33 creatures in this deck, which means there's 13 creatures that aren't spirits, but I will get to that. We'll talk about the spirits first, and there's a lot of really fantastic spirits. As someone who has a name as one deck, I already know all the great black spirits, but in particular, there are some that work great with this strategy. Cryptghast is a spirit, right? This is a card you're probably going to want to throw in any mono black deck, but it's a spirit. We can go get this guy out of our library, throw him in our graveyard, and then recur him in some way. Gravelighter is a great one that came up from Neon Dynasty that is a Plague Crafter type of effect, right? 2 and a black spirit, 2/2 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card if a creature died this turn. Otherwise, each player sacrifices a creature, so you can do either or. It's pretty good that way. Gravewaker is a fantastic one, again, that I have in my deck because it is a spirit and also it has recursion stapled on it. 5 black, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield tap. Now, 7 mana is a lot, but this is repeatable recursion, so we can get this into our graveyard, and if we don't have a mass recursion, we do have some of the one-shot recursion here as well. We can just recur our Gravewaker and then use its ability to start getting those other creatures out of the graveyard. Obviously, we're going to have Kokoshu, probably the best mono black spirit of all time. That's a no-brainer. We got Midnight Banshee, which again is another fantastic one here. In any mono black deck, this is fantastic because at the beginning of your upkeep, you're going to put a -1/-1 counter on each non-black creature. So essentially all your opponent's creatures, your creatures are fine, but it is a spirit. So this is a great one here. He Who Hungers is a fantastic one as well. 4 and a black spirit, 3/2 with flying. Pay 1, sacrifice a spirit, target opponent reveals their hand, choose a card from it. That player discards that card, activate only as a sorcery. Also has Soul Shift 4, which could be relevant here, right? Because when this dies, we can get another spirit out of our graveyard with mana value 4 or less. So that could work, but I mostly like this in the deck for the sacrifice a spirit to look at your opponent's hand thing, because this is a little bit of a combo-y deck. We do have a lot of one-shot win cons in this deck that we want to protect. So what you can do is you can Living Death or whatever, get all your spirits out of the graveyard, and then before you go off or put your combo piece down or put your win con on the table, you can sacrifice a couple of your spirits because you're going to have a lot lying around that you can afford to sacrifice. Look at each opponent's hand, right? So sacrifice, say, 3 spirits, look at all your different opponents' hand, make sure there's not a farewell or some card that's going to absolutely blow you out. Get rid of those, right? Get rid of those cards that are absolutely going to crush you. Maybe Graveyard hates something like that, right? right? So this is going to be a very handy card in the deck. We got some other spirits that, there's a lot of those spirits that just get out of their graveyard, like Bloodghast and Nether Trader, right? These guys are going to be great. We do have some sacking, like I just talked about. These are guys that'll just very easily get out of your graveyard. It's not a ton of value, but it's good for sacking and all that other good stuff. They're spirits. They get out of the graveyard all on their own. Krovakan Horror is another interesting one. 3 and a black horror spirit, 2/2. At the beginning of each end step, if Krovakan Horror is in your graveyard with a creature card directly above it, you may return Krovakan Horror from your graveyard to your hand. And as pay 1, sacrifice a creature, Krovakan Horror deals 1 damage to any target. So again, it has a sack outlet, which could be good with some of those other guys. It has a very interesting ability, right? This is one of those old cards that actually cared about the order of your graveyard. So you are going to have to be careful there. It's going to be really easy for us to have a creature card above this, so we can return it to our hand if we want to. So this is a card that we can go get with our commander, throw it in the graveyard, and then immediately get it out of our graveyard to our hand on the end step if we want to. This ability, though, can also be really handy. Again, we're going to have a lot of creatures lying around. We have a lot of recursion. We can ping some creatures, but particularly it works really, really good with another spirit in our deck, Horobi Death's Wail. And I really did come across a lot of incidental combos like this when researching this deck. This is a great one. These two guys is just pay 1, sacrifice a creature to destroy a creature, right? Because Horobi Death's Wail, which of course is a spirit, says whenever a creature becomes a target of spell or ability, destroy that creature. So now that targeting ping from our Krovakan Horror just becomes destroy a creature. Got to be careful here because of course Horobi works on our creatures as well. So our opponents can use it against us, but we don't care as much with our creatures dying. We're okay with them going to the graveyard. We can get them back. This is a great little combo in the deck that I incidentally sort of assembled. As I talked about in the original 10 deck ideas, we got a couple of win cons that we don't have to recur all of our creatures. We can leave them in the graveyard, Revenant being one of the best, right? 4 and a black spirit with flying and has power and toughness equal to the number of creature cards in our graveyard. So now we don't want to Living Death. We just want that one reanimate one shot. So now we go get 20 spirits out of our library without anything else going on in the deck. We can just go get those 20 spirits, chuck them all in our graveyard, our Revenant included. We reanimate our Revenant, and now it is going to be a 19/19. Without any other shenanigans going on, we now have a 19/19 flyer. That's pretty darn good. Another way that we can just straight up win the game is with Mortal Kombat, 2 black enchantment. Beginning of your upkeep, if 20 or more creature cards are in your graveyard, you win the game. And again, we have exactly 20 spirits in this deck. So we go get those 20 spirits without anything else going on. We throw them in our graveyard. We slap down our Mortal Kombat. And if our opponents can't answer it, we just win the game on our upkeep. So another interesting win con in the deck. And then I started getting into the shenanigans, and I have talked about Hakon Stromgold Scourge on my channel so much. I love this card. It is such a powerful ability of being able to cast night cards from your graveyard. Now, of course, we don't have any knights in this deck other than Hakon Stromgold Scourge, but we can very easily make them so with Maskwood Nexus, right? And this is sort of the deck idea I had. All the other things I've already talked about work all on their own. We don't have to do any of this stuff. We can do the Revenant, we can do the Mortal Kombat, we can do the I just Living Death, recur all my creatures, or if we get our Maskwood Nexus and our Hakon, first of all, we can just Maskwood Nexus, make all of our creatures spirits, and then get all the creatures, all 33 creatures out of our library, chuck them into our graveyard. One of those creatures will be Hakon, which we want in our graveyard, of course, because you can only play him from your graveyard. Once he's in our graveyard, we will cast him from our graveyard. Now, any of our creatures we can now cast from our graveyard. We can also do this a little lesser known way with Ashes of the Fallen, 2-mana artifact. As it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Each creature in your graveyard, only in your graveyard, is the chosen creature type. So again, with Hakon, this will allow us to cast all of our creatures from our graveyard, because now we're going to name Knight, right? So now all of our creatures in our graveyard are Knights, and we can cast them from our graveyard if our Hakon's in play. I also threw Necromancer's Familiar in this deck for obviously a very specific reason. It is a spirit, so obviously it fits the theme of the deck, but it has a very important ability. Pay 1 black and discard a card. Necromancer's Familiar gains indestructible until end of turn, tap it. So this is a spirit that we can go tutor for. And once it's in play, it is a discard outlet, and we need a discard outlet in this deck. If we get our Hakon in our hand, there's no way to get it out of our hand unless we can discard it. So we need a discard outlet in spirit form that we can go tutor for, that we can chuck our Hakon into our graveyard. Also though, because we have a lot of recursion in this deck, we might just get one of our big spirits in our hand, like say our Kokusho, that we don't want to hard cast it, we want to living death it or reanimate it in some other way, so now we can chuck that Kokusho into our graveyard. So we do need a spirit card with a discard outlet on it, so this guy's actually really important in the deck. And I also threw a couple more just combos in this deck. This is not stuff that I typically do in decks that I make. Mikius and Triskelion I have in this deck, and again, you can just assemble this combo. If you get the Maskwood Nexus, now all your creatures are spirits, then you can recur them and you have this infinite combo. You can do this in the deck or not. You do need a sack outlet here, I should say, and we do obviously again have a few in the deck. This isn't necessarily going to straight up win the game. It is a good combo to help close out the game. We have a few that way. Funny enough, another incidental combo here. Harbinger of Night, 2 black, 2/3 spirit. So this is a spirit in the deck. It's a pretty good card in the deck. At the beginning of your upkeep, you're going to put a -1/-1 counter on each creature. So this includes your creatures. It is sort of a pseudo board wipe in the deck that we can go tutor for, but incidentally, as I discovered, works really good with Mikius the Unhallowed. And that's why I left Mikius in the deck, because of course he gives all your other creatures undying. So now we can sacrifice our whole team. They come back into play with +1/+1 counters on them. And on our upkeep, we're going to put -1/-1 counters on them with our Harbinger of Night. So of course, when you have a +1/+1 and -1/-1 counter on a creature, they disappear, right? They go away. Again, another rules issue that people might not be aware of. Those counters cease to exist. They cancel each other out. So your creatures no longer have +1/+1 counters on them. So now the Undying will work again. So great incidental combo that I ended up discovering in this deck again. We also have Graveborn Muse in this deck. And again, another sort of incidental combo that I stumbled across. It is a spirit. I have this card in my Iname as 1 deck, not because I have any zombies, right? Because at the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card for each zombie you control and you lose 1 life. In my Iname as 1 deck, this is just a Phyrexian Arena. It is the only zombie in the deck. I just go get it, comes into play, and on my upkeep, I draw a card and lose 1 life, right? It's just a Phyrexian Arena because it is a zombie. It draws a card for itself. And the same can be here, right? You can just get this out of your library, put it into play, and it's just an extra draw on your upkeep. That is all. However, again, the incidental combo I stumbled across is with Maskwood Nexus, right? Because Maskwood Nexus is not choosing a creature type, it's giving your creatures all types. So our creatures are going to be spirits, they're going to be knights, and they're going to be zombies. And you have to be careful with this, right? On our upkeep, if we have living death through all our creatures in play and we have our Maskwood Nexus, we now have 30 creatures in play, for example, and on our upkeep, we will draw 30 cards and lose 30 life, right? Of course, the lose life part is the part you have to be careful with. You might want to do this, you might not want to, all right? So this can be a non-bow where you could accidentally kill yourself with this, but if you actually want to draw 30 cards, now this is a way you can do that. At the beginning of your upkeep, all your creatures are zombies if your Maskwood Nexus is in play, and you will draw a card for each creature you have in play. Just got to be careful with the life part of it, obviously, right? So there's a ton of stuff going on with this deck. It is super interesting. I tested it a couple times. There's different directions you can go depending on the cards you have in your hand. You do have a couple tutors in the deck if you want to tutor for certain pieces. It is a little more high-end, I think, than most decks I make on my Underwhelming Commanders video, but it's also really, really fun. I got a lot of different win cons that you can do in the deck. You can do the Revenant one, you can do the Mortal Kombat one, you can do the Maskwood Nexus stuff, you can do Hack-On. There's a lot of different ways you can go with this. So even though it is a little combo-y, there is a lot of different directions you can go with it as well. So every time you play this deck, you're definitely not going to be doing the same thing every time, right? And that's what I think is fun about it. So of course, the deck list for it is in the description below. Feel free to check it out. Like I said, this is a really fun one. Give it a whirl, see if it's your thing. And if you like the way I build decks, I do it on my Patreon. The link for that is in the description below as well. I do patron deck decks for my patrons. They give me a suggestion of a commander that they want to build around or just a deck idea that they want to go after, and I will build a deck for them just like I do on my Underwhelming Commanders video. So if you're interested in any of that kind of stuff, feel free to give my Patreon link a click and come join the fun. That is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.